10 years ago, my life changed forever when I downloaded Ableton. Since then, I've personally used Ableton to get over 100 million streams, tour the world as an artist, and after over a decade of experience, I have some tips, tricks, and wisdom to transform the way that you make music. And now you don't have to spend the next 10 years learning what I learned, and instead you can learn it all in like 10 minutes. All of these tips were huge breakthrough moments for me personally, so make sure that you watch all of them because you don't want to miss out on that breakthrough moment in your own life. This video could actually change the way you make music and change your life because each of these 10 tips did that for me. And just as a little side note, there's a pretty long free trial for Ableton, so if you don't have it yet, you can still watch this video, decide if you want to try it out, and then go for that free trial. Okay, let's get started. My first tip is to have a folder dedicated to sessions. When I first started working in Ableton, I made the mistake of saving all my sessions in the same project folder because I didn't understand the way Ableton structures things. So make a new folder on your computer just for sessions and save each song as a project in that folder. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Okay, so let's say you just open up a new session. You can either start a little bit on something, but I like saving right out of the gate just to make sure that I'm not going to lose anything. So go ahead and go to File, Save Live Set As, and then make sure you have a specific folder for Ableton sessions created. Mine's usually just called Sessions. I made this one called Ableton Sessions as an example. So you're just going to go into that folder and save your project, and then click Save. Now if we go into the Finder and we go into that folder, you'll see the project saved with the session folder in it. You want to make sure all of your songs have their own project folder and not just their own session folder. So the project folder says project next to it and the session folder says ALS. Now, one more quick tip is you'll also want to collect all and save. So all the sounds and samples that you have for this project are inside this project folder. So let's go back into Ableton. And let's assume that I've got a song here and I've got a bunch of samples that I dragged in. And I want to make sure that if I share this project with anyone else, that all these little clips are going to be in that project folder. I just go up here and go to File and click Collect All and Save. Now usually I just make sure these first 3 say yes, but you can make them all say yes just in case. And then just click OK. And now everything is collected in that project folder. If we go back to that folder in the Finder, you'll see that there's some new folders that Ableton created. For example, in the samples folder, we have all those clips that we just dragged in. This is such a good way to stay organized and to make sure that you're never missing any clips, which is such a headache when it happens. My second tip is to put a limiter on your master channel and focus on mixing instead of mastering. A friend of mine who works with people like Skrillex, Zed, and Lady Gaga gave me this tip a few years back. I used to focus so much on the perfect mastering chain, and unfortunately, I relied on that to fix my mix. The reality is, you should just put a transparent limiter on your master channel and just focus on getting the best mix possible. I personally use the L2 limiter from FabFilter on the Almost Clipping preset. This is what it looks like. If you want to copy the settings, you could just pause it right now. This tip will allow you to get the cleanest mix and the loudest master while being able to maintain dynamics. This tip has actually made such a big impact on the quality of my music that I can tell the difference between everything I made before it and after it listening back. It really did change my life, so I would highly recommend that you at least try it out for a little bit and see if your mixes go up in quality and clarity. My third tip is to use ping pong delay to widen sounds and use utility to make sounds more narrow. This one is a little bit more simple, but it goes a long way for production and mixing. So let me show you exactly how I do this. Okay, so here I have some vocals for a song I made called Get Even. I was able to utilize this delay technique on one of the returns that I was sending the vocal to. This is what the vocal sounds like just by itself.
Just give me a chance to get even.
And then I sent that vocal to this chain with little alter boy kind of adjusting the formant. And then I used this delay trick to widen things and really make it interesting. Let me show you what the effect sounds like.
Just give me a chance to get even.
It's kind of like a double that's super wide with a really cool vocal tone / timbre, but the widening is what makes the effect. Let me turn off the delay to show you the difference.
Just give me a chance to get even.
It's still cool, but it's not nearly as interesting. Using this delay trick to widen something in the mix just makes it more interesting, and it sounds more stereo and more developed and just more professional. So if you want to make something wider in the mix, all you have to do is just go over here to delay, drag it onto the track that you want to affect, go ahead and unlink these, change them both to time, and then set them to different times. I would say anywhere lower than about 30 milliseconds. So we can do 27 over here and we can do about 8 over here. But really it doesn't matter that much what the numbers are as long as they're different, because all this delay is doing is playing the same sound through the left side and the right side, but just at slightly different times. And that makes your ears think that the sound is super wide. It's kind of a cool little trick that you're playing on your brain. Also make sure to turn your feedback all the way down and turn your dry wet all the way up. Now let's say that the sound is too wide and we want to kind of bring it in a little bit and make it more in the center of the mix. Well, that's super easy. All we have to do is just drag on utility and play with this width function right here.
Just give me a chance to get even.
All of a sudden it's in the middle of the mix now, and we can even make it fully mono if we click on this. Or let's say we're making some crazy dubstep and we just want the sub bass to be mono. We can click this bass mono feature, and this makes it so everything below this frequency becomes mono. Kind of a cool little novelty thing. But anyway, now you know how to make things wider in the mix, and you know how to bring things into the middle, both of which are very important for professional sounding music. My fourth tip is to use the sends and returns for adding effects on vocals. In Ableton, it's very intuitive to drag effects directly onto the tracks, and I would recommend this for 90% of the time, but specifically with vocals, you'll want to use the sends and returns for effects like reverb and delay on your vocals. When you use this system, instead of putting reverb and delay directly on the vocal channel, you get 100% of the dry vocal signal with the reverb and delay on top of it. This will give you a clean, professional sound and keep your vocals really up front and present in the mix, just like they sound on professional records. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so here we have the vocal, and this is without it sending to anything. This is just the dry vocal.
Lost in outer space.
Now let's say we want to add some reverb to this. We can just turn up this send channel right here, and that's going to send this vocal all the way down here to this channel, which has some reverb on it right here. What this does is it allows the vocal to come through completely dry, and then it puts reverb on top of it. Instead of if we just threw reverb like this at the end of the vocal and played with the dry wet. Because every time we're turning the wet up, we're actually making the dry vocal signal come down in the mix and the reverb go up. But we want to be able to control the reverb separately. So this way we can decide exactly how much reverb is on top of the vocal while keeping all of that amazing, clear, dry vocal signal right where we want it. So here's that same vocal with a little reverb on it.
Lost in outer space.
And how about we add a little delay too?
Lost in outer space.
This is a great way to add effects to anything. The song also has a really cool vocoder in it.
Lost in outer space.
And then these chords are really cool too.
Longing for a place I can lay while we find.
Okay, I'm getting carried away. Let's move on. My fifth tip is to utilize EQ on effects. What I mean is when you're sending things like vocals to a reverb return or a delay, you can actually EQ the effect itself. This is something I hear pros, including myself, do all the time to take production to the next level. Let's go ahead and see this tip in action. All right, so this vocal is sending to this reverb and this delay, and all I've done is on the return tracks where the reverb is, I put an EQ after the reverb and scooped out a bunch of these low frequencies that we don't need, as well as a bunch of these high frequencies. Now, if we play it, you can see some of these low frequencies.
Lost.
Now this way we can carve out exactly what we want the reverb to sound like. If we look at the delay, I did the exact same thing here. And without this reverb, we just allow a bit too much coming through here and coming through up here. And it would cause the delay and the reverb to kind of take up too much space in the mix and be too distracting. This is a really good way to hone in the exact sound you want, and another great way to sound professional. My sixth and potentially most important tip is to mix as you go. It's helpful to mix as you produce, at least a little bit, so you can keep everything sounding clean and professional, and there isn't this huge difference between when your song is done being produced and then when it's mixed and mastered. I personally mix as I go and leave that limiter on the master channel, remember from tip number 2. And then when I'm done producing a song, it's basically mixed already too. Then I just have to make a couple tweaks here and there and make sure that it's loud enough, and I'm done. That's it. It's so much easier than having to send it out for mixing and then for mastering and then going back and forth with notes and all that. Like, what if I want to make one small change to the production? Then I have to send it out all over again, and it's just a huge headache. The mix as you go method will save you time, improve your ability to mix and bring your ideas to life, and give you better mixes over time. Also, if you learn to mix your own music, you'll save so much money in the long run. You'll also have more creative freedom, and you won't depend on other people to get your music finished. And to be fair, this is still a good habit even even if you're sending your songs out to be mixed, because all of your tracks will be more cleaned up, it'll be closer to the way you want the finished product to sound, and it'll also give the mixing engineer a head start by providing him with more of a direction to go in terms of mixing the track. A small example of mixing as you go is EQing sub-frequencies out of tracks that don't need them. Let's jump into Ableton so I can demonstrate. So if we go through a finished song of mine, almost every track that you click on will have an EQ, scooping out unnecessary low end. Most sounds don't have any information we need up to about 80 Hertz, and a lot of them even up to about 100 Hertz. So for example, for this shaker, we don't need any of this information down here. It's not adding anything to the song, it's not improving the mix, it's just taking up space. So instead of waiting for a mixing engineer to take out all this unnecessary stuff, I could just mix as I go and clean it up. And as I do that, I'll hear the song back, it'll sound better, and I'll be more inspired to keep going. And in turn, I'll make more music, I'll get better at making music, and I hope you're starting to realize why mixing as you go can be such a helpful tool. Real quick, there's another string noise here. And I put an EQ on it, getting rid of some of this low end stuff that we didn't need, and even a little bit of high end because I wanted to kind of tuck these strings back in the mix. But it's just another example of scooping out some of these sub frequencies that really aren't doing us any favors. Okay, so mix as you go. My 7th tip is to utilize audio effects racks and instrument racks. It sounds kind of complicated, but it's actually super simple. This is a huge time saver that I wish I used more when I was first starting out. Let's say you spend hours getting the perfect effects chain for your vocals. Well, you can actually save this chain as an audio effects rack in Ableton so you don't have to recreate it every single time you want to apply it to a vocal track. You can also use this for instruments as well as just saving presets for effects in general. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about and how you can potentially save hours of tedious work. Okay, so let's say we got the perfect effects chain. We love the way that these strings sound, and we want to be able to use this effects chain over and over. We can just click on the first effect, then hold Shift and click on the last effect to highlight all the effects, and then we just press Command G, and this is going to group them together in an audio effects rack. So now what we do is we click this little symbol right here. It's going to bring up this little save icon, and now we can click on it, and we can save it as our super string effects and press enter. And now anytime we want to use this string effect, we can just drag this onto the channel and all the plugins will appear with all the presets and everything ready to go. This has saved me so much time over the years. It's also worth mentioning that you can do this with an instrument. So let's say that we love this MIDI bass sound. So to do that, all we do is just click on the instrument, hold Shift and go to the last effect that's on the instrument channel, click to highlight all of them and press Command G. That'll group them all together. And then once again, we click on this little circle icon. That'll bring up the ability to click on the save icon. And we can save this instrument and just hit enter. And now whenever we want to use this bass sound, we can just hit Command Shift T, which makes a new MIDI track. And then we can literally just drag this bass onto it, and it'll bring it up exactly the way that we saved it. Once again, super convenient, huge time saver. Let's say that you open a new project and you want to find out where are all these instruments being saved. Well, if you go to the left menu here where it says instruments, just click on that. Click on the little arrow by instrument rack here and scroll down and all of your instruments will be there that you saved. And for the effects, you could just click on audio effects rack, click on the arrow by utilities, click on the arrow for audio effects rack, and all the pre-saved effects will be right down here. Real quick, if this video is helpful or even just entertaining to you, I would really appreciate you considering subscribing and giving me the chance to teach and inspire you to make the best music that you're capable of. And while you're at it, liking this video goes a long way for helping YouTube show it to more people who need help with Ableton. Okay, back to the tips. My 8th tip is to use sidechaining. This technique was made extremely popular through dance music, but it works on tons of different genres, even things like rock, pop, and hip hop. All sidechaining is a compressor that's linked to another sound that tells the compressor when to compress. I'm going to show you what the heck I'm talking about and how to do it yourself, but I just want to say that this transformed my production so much that it caused me to go from sounding like an amateur to sounding like I actually kind of knew what I was doing. It was a make or break thing for me. Whenever I hear a producer who doesn't use sidechaining when they should have, I cringe a little bit inside. So let me show you how to sidechain real quick so you don't cause me or anyone else to cringe when they're listening to your music. Okay, here's a really quick crash course in sidechaining. First, we have this synth. And then we drag in a kick. Now the only issue with this is the kick and the synth are both kind of clashing. So there's a way to make room for both. What you want to do is go to Audio Effects, Dynamics, and drag a compressor onto the synth. or whatever sound you're wanting to sidechain. Then what you're going to do is you're going to click on this little arrow here. It's going to extend the compressor out. You're going to click on sidechain and you want to route it audio from the kick. Boom. Then you're going to want to click where it says EQ, so it's grayed out. You want to turn the ratio all the way up, the attack all the way down, and then click on this little curved line here, and that's just going to make it so we can see what we're doing. The last thing you're going to do is just play with this threshold here. Now let's play that same synth sound with a sidechain on it. Now, all of a sudden, whenever the kick is playing, the synth is ducking in volume. This is creating room in the mix for the kick and the synth to live in harmony. Now, you can use this in rock music, alternative music, indie music, and it's especially helpful for bass and drums. Like if you have a kick and a bass, a lot of times those subfrequencies can really clash a lot. So what you want to do is sidechain the bass to the kick. So whenever the kick is playing, the bass gets a little bit quieter and everything sounds good together. And for dance music and some other styles, you can kind of go wild with the sidechaining and even route another compressor to the snare. So the kick and snare are just really cutting through the mix and you can hear them super clearly. I would recommend trying this out yourself. It's really fun and you can get some great sounding effects pretty quickly. My 9th tip is to use OTT to make things sound huge. Warning, this tip should be used tastefully because it's easy to get carried away. OTT is a preset for the multiband compressor in Ableton, and it just makes anything you put it on sound huge. I remember when my friend Kyle from Gray showed me the power of this preset, and I've used it pretty regularly since then, especially with dance music. Let me show you how to use it and what it sounds like, and then you can decide if you want to use it in your own production, or you might just think that it's a little bit over the top for your taste. After all, that's what OTT stands for, over the top. Anyway, moving on back into Ableton. Okay, now to demonstrate the phenomenal cosmic power of OTT, go ahead and click on Dynamics and then go to Multiband Dynamics, click the little arrow and drag on the OTT preset. So let's go ahead and solo this synth and turn the sidechain off. This is what it sounds like before OTT. And this is after. You might be thinking, what the heck, it sounds kind of weird, super compressed, not really very good. Well, there's a couple settings that we tweak to make it chef's kiss. First thing is, I like to click on these gray areas and drag all the way down. And this just makes it so that the compressor doesn't hold on for too long. And then I'm going to hover until I get this bracket and drag this to the right to turn the mids up and drag this to the right to turn the highs up. Now this is before. It's like, pretty decent. And then with OTT, all of a sudden, it's freaking huge. Like I said, you got to use this sparingly, but especially for electronic music, it's a great way to make things sound awesome. A lot of times too, you'll have to turn something down after you put OTT on it. With great power comes great responsibility. My 10th tip is to utilize the different warp features for different jobs. Whenever you drag a sample into Ableton or record something, you're able to warp that sound. You could speed sounds up, you could slow them down, you can adjust the pitch, you could literally click and drag different parts of a loop to customize it. You can warp things just like the name implies. This is one of the main features that makes Ableton so powerful. However, there are a couple little tricks that took me forever to learn with these warp features that improve the quality of the sounds I was warping and also just made Ableton way more fun for me in general. So let me show you exactly what I mean. Okay, so when you drag something into Ableton, you can make it so that if it's a long loop like this, it automatically makes the loop that you're dragging in the same BPM of the song that you're working on. So for example, the song I'm working on is 120 BPM and this loop is 122, but Ableton made this loop the same tempo as the song. If we click on the loop and we solo it, you can see here there's all these different warp modes. And there's a couple fun little tricks we could do with these warp modes. For example, on the beats mode, we can pick one of these, like 8th notes or 16th notes, and change this little arrow icon to stop, and then drag this down to kind of get a glitching effect. This is what the sample sounds like before. This is what it sounds like with that little glitching effect. We can even turn that into 8th notes or 32nd notes. Okay, let's go ahead and go to complex. This is just a great general warping mode to use. And we can cut the loop in half or make it twice as long by using these divide and multiplication buttons down here. This is making it twice as long. And this is making it twice as fast. Now we can make it twice as long, but we can use a different warp mode like re-pitch, and we get kind of this cool slow effect. This is a really good way to make samples kind of feel like you sampled them from vinyl, or just make them sound a little bit more old or vintage. But each of these warp modes have a unique way that they affect the sound, and I would encourage you to experiment with them and kind of get a feel for what each of them sound like. It's also worth mentioning that usually for drum samples, say a kick sample, a snare, and certain hi-hat sounds, I just turn warp off altogether like this, because I just want to use the original sample exactly how it sounds, and I don't want to tweak it at all. This is also great too if you're recording vocals, because when you do warp stuff, it can affect the quality, and usually the more you warp, the more it can kind of mess with the quality a little bit. That's part of the reason why I showed you that re-pitch trick, which made it sound lower. But it also kind of keeps the quality up there too. So once again, just play with these, see what you like, get a feel for them, because the warp features in Ableton are insane. Like look at this, I can totally adjust the loop just by clicking here, and dragging this over. You can literally just completely screw this up any way you want and get some pretty wild effects. And we can even do super weird stuff by stretching stuff out super far or pushing stuff together and making it super quick. And you can really start to deconstruct stuff. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. I would encourage you to experiment. Alrighty, I hope you learned at least one or two things that you can take with you in your production journey moving forward. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to comment as I read all the comments. And remember, if you don't have Ableton, there's a 90-day free trial, so you can go experiment with it for 90 days completely for free. I think it's the most user-friendly and inspiring DAW to work on, so I'd recommend it to anyone at any level. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but I'll put a link to their website in the description. Thanks so much for your time. I genuinely value your attention, and remember to stop making excuses and start making music. Cheers.